Hey everyone, and welcome to the Drone U Studios. Today we are going to be comparing the Mavic 2 Enterprise Dual Advanced to the Autel Evo 2 Dual Enterprise. This is the 640T version, so the higher quality thermal camera and visual camera. Now, if you want to not skip to the end, I'll give you my conclusion right now. Honestly, Mavic 2 Enterprise Dual Advanced is, in my eyes, for the price point, portability, self-heating batteries, ability to fly more days out of the year, Mavic 2 Enterprise Dual Advanced, in my humble opinion, is a better drone. But if you are looking for a non-DJI drone, the Autel Evo 2 Dual Enterprise is probably the closest thing that you can get as far as a competitor to DJI's offering. That said, why do I have the Mavic 3 here? Simply to kind of show you the size comparison. The Autel Evo 2 Dual is comparable in size more so to the Mavic 3 than the Enterprise drone, okay? So you can see here essential size comparisons, and you can see that the Autel Evo 2 Dual is pretty sizable. Even when you look at the two remotes, there's a huge difference between the two remotes. The Autel Evo 2 Dual remote is a lot bigger than the Mavic 2 Enterprise Dual remote. Frankly speaking, there's a lot of different things about these two drones, so let's get into those. Let's talk about the cameras on these two drones. So on this drone, you do have that 8K camera. You do have, I believe, 8 times digital zoom. Whereas with this camera, it is a smaller sensor, but it offers more megapixels. Why is that a big deal? Well, with all the new photogrammetric changes to the processing engines, they are factoring in for a higher pixel count. You'll notice this if you run a single grid mission with the Phantom and with one of these. You'll notice you actually get more points out of these because it shoots a 48 megapixel image versus a 20 megapixel image. And because of how step 1 is changed in a lot of the softwares, you'll actually get more points from this particular aircraft. That said, when it comes to these two cameras, we have a quick video here where we can show you zooming in with this particular drone and zooming in with this particular drone when it comes to inspections. This brings up one of the major differences between these two aircraft, and honestly, dependent on how much experience you have flying, this could really change which drone you want to use. First and foremost, I'm just actually going to turn on both drones so you can see this. But it's important to note that with both drones, you can see thermal and visual at the same time. But the way that they do it is very different, okay? With DJI, you're gonna have your thermal image on one side of your display, and you're gonna have visual on the other side. Versus with the Autel, you are going to have the thermal overlaid on the visual. Now, there are pros and cons to both. The pro with the overlay in Autel is that if you are trying to focus on one particular point, like flying a power pole, for example, it's gonna be a lot easier to line up your visual camera, get the photo that you need, turn on thermal, and boom, it's the exact same image. Whereas with the Mavic 2 Enterprise Dual Advanced, you will find that the two cameras don't actually match perfectly. Like if you're going between visual and thermal, sometimes you have to adjust the camera just ever so slightly. But to give you an idea, I'm gonna go ahead and move these drones and give you a quick look. You can also see which drone turned on faster. So if speed is important to you, Mavic 2 Enterprise Dual Advanced again is the winner. On the right side of your screen, you can see the Autel Evo 2 Dual. It also has this cool box where you can set up to tell you the hottest and the coldest points. And one thing that the Autel Evo 2 Dual Enterprise has that the Mavic 2 Enterprise Dual Advanced does not have is isotherms. Isotherms were taken away from the Mavic 2 Enterprise Dual Advanced in a firmware update, whereas this drone still does have isotherms. So that said, again, you can see in your screen, Mavic 2 Enterprise Dual Advance has that side-by-side layout, okay, versus, you know, the overlay, okay? Personally, I like the side-by-side. It's a lot easier to navigate and fly around, but some of you inspectors might like the overlay a lot more, and that's just kind of a personal preference, personal bias. When it comes to zooming in, we're on visual here, and if we use the wheel on the side, come on. Oh, it's not gonna let me zoom when I'm in both of them. Let's see, will it do it here? Oh no, it won't. It's only one or the other. So visible, excuse me. So if we click 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, you can see that we can see the doorknob of the door really well. Let's try to point this in the same direction. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Now, something to think about is that I am in the photo mode, so I am able to get much, much, much closer with the photos. That's 32 times zoom. So let's switch over to photos. Let's see if we can zoom in more with photos. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Oh, that's it. So this is good to know. Here on your screen, you can actually see the maximum zoom when in photo mode on both cameras. So the Mavic 2 Enterprise Dual Advance does have a much better zoom as far as trying to actually look at something. So that's cool. The only thing that's confusing is that in order to zoom in and out, it's the opposite motion on the tilt wheel. So you're pressing forward to go out, whereas you're pressing forward on the Autel to zoom in. So that's, I would say that's one of the key differences, okay? When it comes to batteries and flight time, on paper, the Evo 2 Dual has typically a longer flight time, but flying in the cold and high elevation here at Drone U Studios, both drones actually flew almost the exact same amount of time. That's because you have a 4S self-heating battery in the Mavic 2 Enterprise Dual Advanced versus a 3S battery that is not self-heating in the Evo 2 Dual. So that said, frankly, the overall winner, in my humble opinion, is gonna be the Mavic 2 Enterprise Dual Advance. And also, you get a physical flight control mode switch. So which drone is safer? I would argue the Mavic 2 Enterprise Dual Advance, because you have a physical flight mode switch. You can still fly in ADI mode. If you're in public safety, I would say the winner is probably this drone because you have no geofencing. You have no one telling you where you can and cannot fly. You don't have to apply for the QEP program like you do with DJI. But overall, again, I do think that this is a better drone if you still can buy DJI. The remote, it can fly more days out of the year. It has more controls. I will say the customization buttons also work as well. I could not get the customization buttons to work on the Autel remote. I also love how both remotes do have the ability to essentially have that HDMI out. So if you need to live stream to a big TV, you totally can. Now that said, I could not find a port for an SD card on this drone. So if you need a backup of your footage, I know there is internal storage, but I'm not sure how big it is. Again, if you're in public safety and you're ever screen recording, I will say the screen recording options on this remote are much better than the Autel Evo 2 Dual Enterprise. The better drone, I would say, is this one. If you're in public safety, geofencing is a big deal, then this might be a better drone for you. Now, when it comes to mapping, which drone is better? So I've run mapping missions in both over the parking lot here at Drone U. I did get better point density with this particular drone than this one. You also have more parameters that you can control in the mission planning software. So you can also see the camera tilt on this drone, which you cannot see on this drone. You have more ability in mapping planning missions, and frankly, I will say that it's a lot more seamless. In addition, if you're into subject tracking, this drone is way better. The intelligent flight modes on this drone, I would argue, are pretty subpar, frankly. In using the tracking features, the orbit, the smart orbit, frankly, I will say that honestly, I don't know, there's just a lot of trouble. I'm sure with a firmware update they could fix it all, but as of right now, cheaper, more portable, fly more days out of the year, more control, this is the drone for you. Let's take a look at these two drones. So we have the two drones side by side, and you'll notice, I'm not sure if you can see it, but this drone is brand new and it already has a crack in the body. And that happened during a flight mastery course for the student who provided us with this drone, which brings me to an important point. Thank you to our student, Kurt Fargo, for allowing us to test this bird. I will say I was pleasantly surprised at what it's capable of, but if I had to choose and money was a big deal, I would definitely be choosing the Mavic 2 Enterprise Dual Advanced. Now, what if you're a commercial operator and you need it for mapping and you need it for inspections? Honestly, I would say once again, the Mavic 2 Enterprise Dual Advanced is the winner in the competition. And the reason why is that if you're flying, say, solar inspections or whatnot, it's a lot easier to conduct the missions on here. You don't have as much functionality with this drone. Key point, running a mapping mission and being perpendicular to the flight plan, which is so important if you are flying solar missions. In addition, if you're doing inspections, I would say that this drone is better because you have more digital zoom than you do on this particular aircraft. Also, because the customization buttons are working on this remote, this is easier to fly, easier to operate. Now that said, let's say that you are building a drone program or a fleet. It probably will be easier to learn on this drone because a lot of the advanced flight parameters are really not available on this aircraft. If you combine that with the obstacle avoidance of both aircraft, the obstacle avoidance is much more robust in this aircraft. But it's safer for newer pilots because it really limits your ability to fly. I mean, when it comes to the two obstacle avoidances, this drone allows the pilot to have more control, whereas this drone, when the obstacle avoidance kicks in, it literally changes the gains and the sticks, and you can't move forward, backward, etc. Sometimes that can get you stuck, okay? Probably better for newer pilots, frankly. But when it comes to which drone is the safer drone, I would argue Mavic 2 Enterprise Dual Advanced is the safer drone. Why? Because you've got attitude mode built into this drone. You don't have to hack it. You also have more information on your batteries. You have a self-heating battery, so in cold days, you're gonna be able to have longer flights and have more of them. To be real, there's really no fail-safes in this. Yes, you have return to home. Yes, you have a pause button on the remote. But if something were to happen with your compass for whatever reason, you have no fail-safe trigger, i.e. no attitude mode to take over ultimate control and actually be able to save the bird in case of an emergency. So with that said, once again, safer drone I do believe is the Mavic 2 Enterprise Dual Advanced, but for newer pilots, this might be better for newer pilots, especially with public safety. One of the things that I love that Autel did with the Evo 2 is if you click the top bar, it's going to give you that voltage on main screen. That's really critical to truly determining whether you're going to have a safe flight or not. If you've joined us for Flight Mastery, then you know you got to do that battery test every single time that you take off. That's the only way that you're going to know whether you'll have a truly safe flight or not, okay? And I love that they added the voltage on main screen for the Evo 2 Enterprise. It's just that it's an aggregate voltage. So, you know, if you multiply 3.6 times 3, because it's a 3S battery, you're going to be at 10.8 volts when it's time to fly home. Versus that Mavic 2 Enterprise Dual Advanced, you've got to click the battery information and go to the details to actually look at the individual cell voltages. So we've talked about how the Mavic 2 Enterprise Dual Advanced has more zoom, more megapixels. Even though it's a smaller technical sensor, the fact is that you've got more capability with that sensor. In addition, we've talked about how you have more flight days out of the year because you have a self-heating battery with the Mavic 2 Enterprise Dual Advanced, which you do not have with the Autel Evo. What's really interesting is that Autel added a 3S battery to this aircraft, and with everything that it's powering, you would think that it would add a 4-cell battery, whereas the Mavic 2 Enterprise Dual Advanced is a 4-cell battery. Honestly, the flight times on paper, this is a lot better of an aircraft, but you know, flight times in the real world, you're getting almost the exact same flight time. And honestly, I would say that, again, the Mavic 2 Enterprise Dual Advanced is a better aircraft overall. Also, and now this is bias, I like the smaller remote. I like the ability to essentially have what feels like a normal remote, whereas this remote is so widespread. I don't know, I'm just not a big fan of remotes. That's personal bias. One of the issues with this drone is that there's no physical flight mode switch on the Evo 2. Even you can set up C2 to go between ludicrous mode and just regular normal position mode, but my custom buttons are not working. And I did update the firmware on this and it's still not working. Now, one of the biggest questions I hear from a lot of experienced pilots when talking about competitors to DJI is the constant problem of video transmission distance or controllability distance. Autel deserves a straight up award because frankly, the Autel Evo 2 Dual, I never had an issue with video transmission, not a single time. I flew it as far away as it would let me go, which was like 1,600 feet. And I never had an issue. And we are in a city, we're in a dense urban environment, never had an issue. With DJI, I've flown it further than that, further than 1,600 feet, and I've never had an issue with it either. Both drones do have the automatic switching between channels. So the Evo 2 Dual Enterprise does have the 2.4 and 5.8. So does the DJI. And frankly, these are really, really competitive drones. They really are. And frankly, Autel has done a phenomenal job at offering a real competitor to the market. I just think the only thing that they're not really competing on is price point. You know, that's probably the biggest downfall. So let's talk about the accessories. The Mavic 2 Enterprise Dual Advanced does have the speaker, the light, and the strobe. We did not buy the RTK unit, so we do not have that. But the Autel Evo 2 Dual has literally the exact same, light, strobe, and speaker. On the light, they have multiple settings to adjust the brightness of the light, which I actually think is really cool. But one of the functionality issues with the speaker is with the speaker on the Mavic 2 Enterprise Dual Advanced, you can essentially set your recording and say,
"Help is on the way." I repeat, help is on the way.
And it records that and saves it and then plays it through the drone.
Help is on the way. I repeat, help is on the way.
With the Autel Evo 2 Dual, you can live say, "Hey Rob, you're being too loud outside of the studio," but it didn't save the clip, or it didn't save that audio clip so that I could replay it. Sometimes that's really important for public safety teams that want to have standardized responses, like, "This is the blah, 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 blah fire department. We are here to help you." Like, these kind of predetermined commands to make PR friendly noises with your drone. Evo 2 Dual is going to be harder to set those standards. But again, I'm sure it sounds a lot like that I am bashing the Evo 2 Dual. This is the closest competitor to any DJI drone that I have ever seen. A couple of tweaks and it's literally right there with this drone. So we're gonna write up an article to kind of talk about the key differences between these two birds, cameras, batteries, etc., including the technical specifications so that you can compare the two. But in the real world, I would say that I absolutely prefer the Mavic 2 Enterprise Dual Advanced. But there are certain reasons that you may want to choose the Autel Evo 2 Dual. And if you do go with the drone, you are not wasting your money. You can get a whole lot out of this drone. It's a phenomenal platform, but if I had to choose, I'm choosing the Mavic. There is a little bit of intrinsic bias, we've got to say that, right? I mean, we've been flying DJI for 10 years. So I do like the ability to just get in there. I know how everything works. So that said, if you have been flying DJI and you're looking to get away from DJI, there is not a better, more intuitive competitor than the Evo 2 Dual. I hope you enjoyed this review. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Thanks for everyone who watches the Ask Drone U podcast. If you're thinking about becoming a member to the world's largest online library of drone classes, try to become a member. I promise you it's worth it. We also have our own app that's outside of Facebook, and it's really popped off. It's done so well. So that said, become a member. If you are in public safety, keep an eye out. We already have our Props Public Safety Law Enforcement Edition class out. That is really built for fleets and teams to help you manage lots of trainings across lots of people and truly know who is proficient versus who is current. So if you love to fly like me, we'll keep taking flight, and thanks for joining me today. As always, my name is Paul, and this is Drone U.